And good afternoon. Thank you for tuning in. News Talk 95.3, Michiana's news channel. I am your host, Casey Hendrickson, and want to thank our special guest. We have from the Elkhart City Police Department, Assistant Chief Thayer is here, man. How are you?
Hi, Casey. How you doing? Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for coming on, and I just want to set the rules straight here. There's an ongoing investigation in the video that everybody's talking about, so he can't specifically comment about that case because of the investigation. But you did want to come in and kind of talk to people about some of the other stuff that's going on. Obviously, it's a little surprising to me that you not only had a local newspaper kind of go after your department, and people have pointed out that the Tribune went after you guys a lot more aggressively than they have ever really gone after the South Bend Police Department. But ProPublica, which is a national media outlet, is kind of behind that. And they have been known to be activists in the past and work very closely with community activists around the country. So it seemed very much like there's an event that happened, somebody who doesn't like the police department already reached out to somebody at ProPublica, and ProPublica gets the local media involved, and it becomes kind of a thing. Next thing you know, we have the Elkhart City Police Department. Everybody who's ever been promoted there is a criminal, has disciplinary issues, and that sort of thing, and that really isn't the case. So could you just kind of set the record straight on some of the history? And because people don't realize there's a turnover in leadership too, and everybody kind of runs the department a little bit differently. And you can have very minor infractions that are disciplinary issues, up to major things. So just because there's been a disciplinary issue doesn't mean it was major anyway.
Sure, absolutely. It was a little over a year ago we started receiving public information requests from a reporter linked to ProPublica. And it went way back into, retirees, former police officers, investigators. Some of that information was hard to find because, right now we're in a transition of going to like a digital type of records versus papers. And literally there was some files that we would actually have to dig through boxes in order to find. And we provided that information for them. And it just got, to the point where we're naturally curious people is, what is going on? Where is this leading? And this continued so much to the point that we actually had to assign an officer almost full time just to fill all these public information requests. Again, we complied with those. There's certain legal obligations that we have. We have to go through our legal department and make sure we're providing accurate information. And then lo and behold, the perfect storm, these reports started coming out, shining a light on our police department that just really is an accurate and true representation of what our department is.
I was reading through the articles both in the Tribune and in ProPublica, and I noticed one very, very simple kind of pattern. And I guess maybe because I'm always reading the media and I'm always looking for this stuff, maybe it's more noticeable to me than it would be for the casual reader. But there was no context in any of it. It was just kind of raw data, no context. This many officers this many officers that, officers with criminal convictions, that sort of thing. I think that number was 3 or something like that. And I'm just sitting here, I'm going, okay, but what are the disciplinary issues? Was it somebody didn't take his K-cup out of the Keurig and somebody got really butthurt about it that day? Was it serious? Did somebody get hurt? There was just no context. And typically when you have a story like that or a case like that, you'll have a list of, hey, this is how many were in this category, this is how many were in that, and they didn't really have that. So you've got an overall sort of picture being painted of the department that everybody in leadership there has routine disciplinary issues, doesn't engage properly with the public, and may actually be a criminal. First question that we had when we put it up on the Facebook page today is, what questions do you have for the assistant chief, and when are they going to stop hiring people with criminal records? And okay, so I'll let you address that because I guess people are asking.
People with criminal records. As you understand, I mean, I'm sure you're aware that people aren't applying for jobs for police officers.
I can't imagine
anymore.
Why. Yeah.
And this is a good example why. Our police departments across the country are under attack. I truly fear for this profession. If it's not us, who is going to go out there and do this job? There's fewer and fewer of us that are willing to stand up and take a stand. And this type of attack has to stop. We have wonderful, dedicated police officers out there. There's agencies that are struggling to put people in uniform. There's agencies that are talking about lowering their hiring standards. We won't do that. And, criminal records, that's unacceptable. There's different levels. We believe in second chances, but we cannot lower our standards in order to fill a uniform. Our citizens demand better, and that's the way we hire our people in Elkhart.
And certainly there's going to be some people listening to this that are going to say, all right, so he says they won't lower their standards, criminal records are acceptable, there's second chances. What about these 3 individuals that were in the ProPublica article who have these criminal records? Can't identify the individuals, obviously, for privacy reasons, but, what level of offenses are we talking about here? Can you speak to that?
As far as officers that have been involved in minor criminal offenses?
Yeah, because I think 3 of them came up in the ProPublica article.
Well, just like any other citizen, we're all human. We all make mistakes. We all have lives outside of our job. So officers have faced criminal charges, but just like any other citizen, they face those criminal charges in a court of law. They paid their dues, and they've been disciplined for it. To think that we're, free from making mistakes out there is totally untrue. Until they devise a button on our belt that we can push and go into robot mode and not be affected by all the stuff that we see on the road and see the carnage and the suffering that's out there and the evil that we fight every day. To say that we can't be human is totally unfair.
But it is safe to say, for anybody who might be concerned about reading that article, that anybody who is still on the force does not have a serious criminal offense on their record.
That's correct. I mean, Casey, if you study history, the greatest leaders and throughout history, how many of the great leaders have had a flawless record in their past? You look at from Patton to whoever, they've fallen, they've gone down the ladder, and they've gone back up. That's what makes them great leaders, because they've faced adversity and they've overcome that adversity, and it makes them better. So when they do have a disciplinary issue or something before them, they've handled that, they've been there, they've been through that, so they can handle that more professionally and as a leader. Discipline. Everybody looks at discipline as being negative. I'm a father. I discipline my son. Why do I discipline my son? Because I love him. Because I want him to be, a man. I want him to grow up correctly. And that's why we discipline, because we're developing that person. It's the same thing with an officer. There's no other profession out there other than maybe the military that is as serious about discipline as we are. And we hold the people to those higher standards. And that is what is important about our discipline, is we're developing those officers. You look at an officer that says, well, he's had this, he's had this, he's had this. How minor are those? Some of those are for a traffic infraction. Right. Some of those are for, there may be some more serious issues where the discipline is greater. But you also look like, well, why is that officer still there? Well, it's because whoever provided that discipline saw the value of that person and saw that person is a value to this department, it's a value to that community. And all we have to do is develop him, harness him, and make him a better officer. I was telling people the other day, I've been disciplined here at work. I've been written up. Other people have been written up. It's hard to find people who have not been written up. And my boss is nodding his head right now. Yep, written them up. It's hard to find people in other professions that haven't had that contact with HR. It's just not public record now, and it's not held against them for the rest of their professional career. So we're going to take a quick little time out. We're going to come back with Assistant Chief Thayer from the Elkhart City Police Department. And yes, we'll get into the chief's suspension and some other stuff as well coming up on Newstalk 95.3, Michiana's news channel. And good afternoon. Thank you for tuning in. Newstalk 95.3, Michiana's news channel. I am your host, Casey Hendrickson. Special guest with us today from the Elkhart City Police Department. Assistant Chief Thayer is with us. Once again, thank you so much for spending time with us this afternoon. And obviously there is this viral video that came out. So people were sending me text messages and saying, how did the media get the video? And that was because it was released through a FOIA request. Correct. There was a FOIA request, which the Assistant Chief kind of talked about, actually going back over a year. There's been several. And pretty much have an officer full-time kind of fulfilling those requests. Started to wonder, where is this coming from? I've already told you my theory about this. For those of you who listen on a regular basis, I think that there are certain community activists that have been trying to go after this department for a number of years, got ProPublica involved in it. And I read the ProPublica article. I read the South Bend Tribune article. And the one thing that was missing out of both of those articles was any context as to what they were reporting.
We were just kind of talking about this during the commercial break, and with conversations with people who are writing for the papers. They're like, well, these numbers are true, these facts are true, but you only gave half of them. And so if you leave out half of the story, you're kind of steering the narrative. But you are also saying that you're really bothered by the comparison of the Elkhart City Police Department with the New York City Police Department. And people like to talk about New York now because now New York is safe, but they ignore the policies that were in place to get New York to that point, how things kind of were for a number of years there. And now, of course, they decry those policies while still saying, well, it's still a safe place. But we were also talking about this before, and I've heard this from other NYPD officers, is that they're scared to death to use force now, not just firearms, but they're scared to death to even engage with anybody. I mean, look at what happened with the guy who was put in the headlock, and everybody claimed that he was choked to death. He wasn't, and just everything that happens. But kind of talk about the comparisons with the Elkhart City Police Department in New York and why you disagree with those.
Sure, Casey. To compare the number of shootings that we've had with a major city like that, I mean, it's totally unfair. You can predict the number of shootings a community is going to have just as much as you can predict how many times it's going to rain next year. There's no comparison. I mean, you can't plan for it. The only thing you can do is to train our officers to handle such situations. The chief and I, when we came on in 2016, we agreed when we took that oath, we have a fundamental obligation to each one of our officers, to our officers' families, to their children, to their kids, to their spouses, to provide the best training that we can, the best equipment that we can, so we ensure that their loved ones, their police officer loved ones, are going to come home to them at night. And, to berate our officers because they were involved in X amount of shootings, I mean, that's totally unfair. The public needs to know what these officers go through. I sat next to one of our sergeants. He's a leader, and unfortunately, he's been in 3 shootings. We have 15 officers that work the street. We had a major bank robbery, and it was a takeover bank robbery. How many officers are going to go to that? Everyone that's available is going to go to that. And in this instant, he gets out of his car. There's a lengthy pursuit. These individuals are armed, and the suspect decides to run left in the direction of where this officer is. It's pure chance. And, he chooses to threaten the life of one of our citizens. And this officer, knowing full well the scrutiny that he would be going through, knowing that this is the 3rd time he's going to go through it, he still took action. I mean, I thank God we have people like that out there.
You notice they never picked Chicago, Los Angeles, St. Louis, even Indianapolis. They never picked those cities. They picked the one anomalous low-crime big city that we have in the country. Talk a little bit about the police chief. He was suspended. We didn't hear about it for a couple of weeks. A lot of people were upset with the mayor about that. The mayor said that he felt that the discipline that was given to these officers involved in that tape was not severe enough, and he had to take action. Kind of talk about that a little bit.
Well, we're not free from mistakes because we're chiefs, or we're not free from mistakes. And Chief Wimbigler, I can tell you, is one of the best chiefs I've ever served with, if not the best chief. He had to take, when he came on, we were understaffed, we were under-equipped, we were under-trained, and, our morale was pretty low. And he is just, the things that he has built, we have a countywide homicide unit, thanks to him. We're working towards a joint SWAT team. He's developed new hiring procedures, recruiting. And unlike other departments, we're very close to being full staff. Our lateral program, other officers from other agencies want to come to the Elkhart Police Department to work. But he's not free from discipline, and he's serving his discipline, and we will admit our mistakes, and we'll take responsibility, and we'll work towards building the community's trust again. All
right, so we got less than a minute left. Kind of tell people what you want to know about your police department that maybe they're not going to get from the press.
Well, I just want our citizens to rest assured that we have some of the best police officers in the country, and the actions of a few don't represent the men and women that go out there every single day to protect our citizens. We need our citizens to stand there. You see one of our officers, go up and talk to them and see what a quality police officer we have. We want our officers and our community to be on first name basis. We want to know each other.
Thank you so much. Assistant Chief Thayer from the Elkhart City Police Department joining us. We appreciate your time today, and we'll have more coming up. News Talk 95.3, Michiana's news channel.